Today we're pulling back the curtain.
Pulling it back.
A little inside scoop.
You want to see the wizard? He's a normal man. And so are a lot of the people behind these brands.
We are talking about something that I know you guys have been dying for us to speak on. We're going to get requests to talk about something new.
Yeah, they said, will you please talk about anything except for the fact that drugs and cosmetics are different? How about the fact that cosmetics and makeup are kind of different? Yes. So when I tell people that I am a cosmetic formulation chemist, their first question is almost always, oh, so do you formulate makeup?
Mm-hmm.
The answer is no, not really. We mostly do personal care products. And most of the time, if you do one, you don't do the other. And before we can even really talk about makeup, I kind of wanted to just set up that, kind of break the fourth wall, the cosmetic fourth wall a little bit, and talk about the way that skincare lines and brands work, who's doing what, and why we don't make makeup even though we are cosmetic chemists.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Beauty by the Beaker. I'm Sadie.
I'm Natalie.
And we are two cosmetic chemists, and we're here to give science a hot new makeover.
We are.
If this is your first time tuning in, welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for joining us this week.
Yeah, we're so excited to see you.
We're so excited.
First timer.
First timer, we hope you stick around. We have a backlog of 34 episodes that you could also binge right this second if you're interested.
And they're all good. So.
And if you've already clicked out,
we miss you.
We do.
Actually, we're going to have so much fun without them.
Yeah, I don't even care.
You know what? We didn't need them anyway.
No.
It's called trimming the fat.
We have like 6 other loyal listeners. So.
Yeah. All 10s of you.
Yeah. What's that meme? It's like, there are dozens of us. Dozens. That's how we feel. We're small but mighty.
Yeah.
We're back today in the science salon, and we are talking about something that I know you guys have been dying for us to speak on. I know this is what the people have been wanting to hear. It's the month of May. That could only mean one thing.
And what is that one thing that it means?
Well, why don't you tell me? Because now that I'm setting this up, I'm feeling a little insecure. What if I'm wrong?
You're like, wait, what are we talking about?
Yeah. Hold on, jump in.
Well, because also today's episode, as you were setting it up, I was like, okay.
Where's she going with this?
People have been requesting like why we don't formulate makeup.
Weren't you the whistleblower on that?
Maybe.
I thought you said that people, every time we mention we're cosmetic chemists, people are like, oh, so you make foundation.
Oh, then yeah, I guess I was. So today we are jumping into part 1 of another 2-part episode on makeup, kind of. The intersection of makeup versus other cosmetics. We've kind of talked about on this podcast, there is cosmetics, it's an umbrella, but then there are like, the little subcategories underneath. And drugs kind of are they're almost more than an umbrella. It's like an umbrella over a Venn diagram, over half a Venn diagram, obviously.
So picture this in your mind. Over half of a Venn diagram, aka a circle,
plus the other circle half that's in it.
That's a full Venn diagram.
No.
Oh, you're saying
because it doesn't cover the other
you're
drug
saying
part.
Like an almost full moon diagram, but the whole thing is closed, and there's just
you get the full circle, and then you get half of the other circle
inside of it.
Yeah.
So like an eyeball almost.
Yeah. A sliver of drug falls into the circle of cosmetic.
Okay. Well, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I'll put the graphic right here.
Yeah, for our visual learners.
Drugs, cosmetics. The umbrella only covers the cosmetic section. But there's a little sliver where drugs and cosmetics intersect.
I'm so excited to see what you come up with for that. If you're an audio listener, you're probably missing out on whatever the hell's on the screen right now.
I imagine the umbrella says cosmetics, but then what's underneath it is also cosmetics and drugs, topical OTCs.
Okay, I love that. Can't wait.
Anyway, all that to say, we've covered that.
Literally
more than enough.
So many times. We're going to get
times.
requests to talk about something new. So.
Yeah, they said, will you please talk about anything except for the fact that drugs and cosmetics are different?
We're going to say
No.
yes after this episode.
How about the fact that cosmetics and makeup are kind of different?
Okay, we're going to the other side of the Venn diagram today.
Yeah, but same umbrella.
Yes, don't even forget. It's a pretty big umbrella.
It's big.
Yes.
This industry's huge.
It is. It's one of those beach umbrellas.
Or patio umbrella.
Or, yes. On like a cute little restaurant.
yeah,
with, like,
bistro umbrella.
It's a bistro umbrella, exactly. Honestly, it's bordering like one of those.
Circus tent.
Okay,
Are you say awning?
Yeah, but circus tent works just fine. It's great.
Those are actually interchangeable.
Yeah, pretty much. They both have stripes on them. They're both roughly the same size.
Exactly. Okay, well, if you weren't following what exactly we're doing, if for some reason you didn't follow what this episode is about,
yeah. Let's repeat it just in case.
we're mostly just talking about why we don't make makeup.
Yeah.
So,
Because, surprise, in our careers, both of us have never formulated true makeup products.
yeah, at least not for a customer.
True.
Yeah. When I tell people, at least this is my personal experience, Sadie can chime in, see if she agrees. But when I tell people that I am a cosmetic formulation question, what?
Are they confused?
Yeah.
Why?
Guys.
Okay, also, this is our second episode.
And it's late.
It's 9:11.
That's late.
It's very late. We've both worked full days today. So sorry. Sorry for the giggles, okay?
This
If an airplane
episode-
shows up, I'm ending the recording. It's over.
Yeah. So I wanted to do an episode about makeup because I like to do makeup personally in my free time. I'm a makeup hobbyist.
A little makeup aficionado, if you will.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but yeah.
Aspiring aficionado?
Sure. I have some history with makeup, but it's not really through my job as a cosmetic formulation chemist. Yeah.
I was just laughing about a question again. Sorry.
Reading my notes.
Did you see a question mark and that just confused you?
Oh, it says, I'm a cosmetic formulation chemist. Their first question is almost always.
I'm sorry. I keep derailing you.
No, it's okay. It's silly episode day.
It is.
Yes. So when I tell people that I am a cosmetic formulation chemist, their first question is almost always, oh, so do you formulate makeup?
Just because like cosmetic
Yeah.
makes you think makeup.
Yes. And the answer is no, not really. We mostly do personal care products. And most of the time, if you do one, you don't do the other. And before we can even really talk about makeup, I kind of wanted to just set up that scenario. I guess kind of break the fourth wall, the cosmetic fourth wall a little bit, and talk about the way that skincare lines and brands work and how product libraries are formed with brands and who's doing what and why we don't make makeup even though we are cosmetic chemists.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the goal, the actual goal of today's episode. And then in part 2, we're going to talk about where cosmetics, personal care rather, like skincare, because cosmetics would be like the umbrella term,
Remember,
the bistro tent.
It's a circus tent. So
Cosmetics is a circus tent, but then personal care is what we formulate. And then there's makeup, which is usually different.
Yeah.
But yeah, so next week we'll talk more about that intersection. This week I wanted to preface that conversation as to why there is a difference.
Perfect. Today we're pulling back the curtain.
Pulling
we're
it
giving
back.
You a little inside scoop.
You want to see the wizard? He's a normal man. And so are a lot of the people behind these brands. Before I started working in the industry, I assumed that if a company sold a cosmetic, they were the ones that came up with the formula. And then they would like make it and package it and then ship it out to their customers. This is almost never how it works. It's possible. Some like really small indie brands might do it that way.
And also really big brands might do that.
Yes, but even then, kind of, sort of, not really.
Yeah, I'm thinking like L'Oreal probably.
Yeah, but even
has
not them, really.
Really?
No, because
They don't have their own facilities?
But they've required so many of them that they're like still technically different labs.
But they do all of the R&D and packaging and filling for their brands, right?
I mean, yeah, some very, very big companies that can be the case.
Yeah.
But usually the reason why it is a case is because they have so many resources that it's as if they are doing what everyone else is doing, but just within their own community of resources.
So it looks the same. Like it might technically be that they're doing that, but it looks the same as outsourcing.
Yeah. So yeah, this is usually not how this works because each step in making a product, getting it from, concept to a consumer, each step requires a lot of expertise, and especially like putting cosmetics out in the US. There has to be a lot of like know-how, making sure that everything's safe and used correctly and labeled correctly and functions properly. And all of that has to be accounted for. And the amount of resources and the skill set that would be needed for one brand to be able to do everything, it's not really like practical, I guess.
It's not super realistic.
No.
Yeah.
So before a cosmetic can make it to the shelf, it obviously has to go through a bunch of steps. First would be something just like an idea or a concept. That is, I mean, that sounds obvious, but like people will hire other people just to come up with ideas. I mean, I'm thinking more like content creators than like brands, but like even brands, there are like innovators, brand innovators and stuff, people that are just coming up with the concepts.
Yep.
And sometimes that takes like market research, seeing what's out there and what gaps need to be filled. And
sometimes it's just seeing a product that you like and you're like, I want to make that.
Yeah.
Exactly the same.
I want it. Can I have that one?
Yeah.
Then there's the actual formulation of the product, testing the formula's stability, designing the packaging, testing compatibility between product and packaging, doing safety testing, includes things like stability, heavy metals testing, preservative testing, production or manufacturing the actual product, distributing the product, marketing the product, all of these things. And then, the marketing even, like I'm not super familiar with that side of it, but I'm sure there's even more steps to that. Like I'm grouping marketing into like one thing. There's also steps here that I'm missing. Those are just a few that I'm thinking of.
There's also regulatory. So like people that gather documents and
make sure that everything's labeled correctly.
Yeah. Which some brands, it's very obvious they do not invest in their regulatory departments.
Right.
You can tell on like an ingredient list. But yeah, if you want it to be well done, there are people who know how to do that. So you want to outsource to them and have them help you with that.
Yeah. So for each of these steps, special skill sets are required and special equipment is sometimes required. So depending on the size of the company and the resources that they have and the number of employees that they have, they might do all of these things, but it's much more likely that they're only going to do a couple of these things and outsource the other ones to specific companies that only focus on that one piece of the bigger picture.
Yep.
In my experience, what I have seen is that typically a skincare brand, the brand itself, the main piece that they are playing is like brand identity. So more than anything, they're just making sure that like it matches their aesthetic, essentially. So like aesthetic might not be like a completely accurate word to use because it's more than just like the colors and wording on the packaging, but like things like ingredient restrictions, or like if you're a makeup company, being a makeup product would be like the brand aesthetic. It might be a little bit weird if they came out with like a body wash as a makeup brand. Might not be within their aesthetic, if you will. And I feel like for me, for my experience, that's usually like the main job, because that is still a big job, like writing product briefs.
Yeah.
Basically just doing all the checks and balances and moving the product through all of these steps is, I feel like, what a skincare brand is usually doing. Rather than actually doing the work of the step, just making sure that the product is moving through those things.
They're essentially the project managers of the entire project.
Yeah.
Like other people are doing the work, I guess, and they're sort of making sure that the work gets done.
Yes. Exactly. And gets done to like the standard that they want it to be at, that they have set.
Yes.
Yeah. Typically, the skincare brand will come up with something called a product brief that outlines what their brand identity is or the goals of the product and things like ingredient restrictions or desired marketing claims. And then they will give that product brief to a lab that they've usually done some amount of research on to see if that lab has the capability to formulate the type of product that they want.
Mm-hmm.
And then formulation chemists like Sadie and I will actually formulate the product based on that guideline that they give you. So then if a company, they have their one product, if they want to add multiple products, their role in the development process is just make sure that the products fit into that brand aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
But who is actually doing the work is less important. So for a product brief, they could send that exact same brief out to like 3 or 4 different labs and get a starting point, whoever got closest on the first attempt, and go from there.
Or the price. Price is a huge one. Whoever can meet their price point or their like turnaround times.
Yes. Yeah.
Those
availability.
Are all,
Sometimes it's just like if they're vibing better with, if they like the way that lab is, their communication skills.
Sometimes like geography, like is the lab close to me?
Yeah.
That could make a big difference.
Yeah. Oftentimes brands do like to be able to like come in and see the product be made. Because again, that's like their job is to make sure things are moving appropriately. So it's not always that brands will choose manufacturers or labs that are nearby, but sometimes they'll like choose a lab that's nearby and a manufacturer that's somewhere else, you know. And that's all just kind of depending on the brand. But we've talked a lot about how broad the industry is. And it's almost impossible for one chemist to be proficient in every single type of cosmetic chemistry.
Yeah.
There are just so many different specialties when it comes to formulating cosmetics. And that's just like the actual formulation step. Obviously, there's so many other big moving pieces, but focusing just on the formulation step, there are differences that I feel like maybe you wouldn't think of that would make it so that not every lab does the same types of products.
Right.
It's not necessarily like better labs are able to do these types of things or like a good lab will be able to produce this type of product. It's more just that like there are, like I said, different specialties.
Yeah.
Just like it doesn't make sense for one singular cosmetic brand to learn how to do every single step in developing a cosmetic. When it comes down to actually formulating the product, there's definitely more than just like formulating the product. Not all manufacturers have labs. Not all labs are connected to manufacturing facilities.
Yep. Because a distinction really quick, the lab does small scale batches to dial in the feel of the product, the look of it, and kind of get close to what the customer wants. And then the manufacturing part of it is actually making that on a huge scale to then fill and then send to a customer. So there are some places that just do the formula development. And then once the formula is ready, they'll say, okay, we'll send this formula out to a manufacturer and then they can actually make it on a larger scale. And like vice versa.
Yeah.
So that's the difference between lab development and manufacturing is typically just the scale of it.
The industry in the US is fairly small. So you can kind of tell a little bit with products like where they were made because usually labs have kind of a style that they follow.
Yep. And if they were made by people who know what they're doing. Like there are some formulas that are just like, okay, like you clearly have no idea.
Yeah. So I made this list of kind of specialties, I guess, areas that require maybe more consideration or expertise. So liquids, because they are liquid and flowable, the stability of them is just a lot different. If something can move around, it's going to be inherently less stable.
Yeah.
And so liquid formulation requires a certain skill set. They're different than solids and That's my next one. Solids. Not every lab does solids because many solids like a balm or like stick formulas will be hot fill. Not everyone has the ability to do hot fill. Those sometimes require like certain cooling tunnels or things like that for large scale production. Also kind of in the solids category, but I didn't write this here because I don't do makeup, is things like pressed powders.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole different thing than a hot pour would be.
Or even just powders in general.
Yeah.
Like
loose powders.
Yeah. Like dry shampoo powders or...
Yeah, mixing dry powders is a different type of mixing equipment than mixing liquids would be.
Which is so crazy. Like you don't even really think about that.
Yeah. But for that reason, labs that do liquids often don't do powders.
Yep.
Then depending on like how the product is being packaged, pouches or wipes can be unique formulation things to go along with that specific type of packaging. But also like if the lab is connected to a manufacturer, whether or not the manufacturer does pouches and wipes.
Yep.
Or things like bottles and tubes. Not everybody does those.
Or aerosols is another one.
Aerosols, yeah. Yeah, aerosols are a whole different ballgame too. We don't do aerosols.
No, we've never formulated them.
I haven't even really like touched that market.
Oh, me either.
Yeah, they use propellants and I don't really even know how it works.
Same.
So don't ask me.
Don't you dare ask us.
And then things like oral care, or if it is OTC, like if you're formulating OTC products or working with drug actives, you have to be a GMP facility, which just means like if you're working with drugs, the FDA cares more and you have to have certain requirements that are more well documented than if you're not.
Yep.
So not all labs will do OTC products. Just requires a bunch of FDA stuff that not everyone wants to deal with. Oral care is a whole different specialty than topical cosmetics because they're coming in contact with mucosal membranes. So, I mean, same thing with like eye care type stuff. I mean, technically, I think a lot of that falls into the liquids, or like if you were doing something like a lash product, some of that has to do with the fact that the packaging would be different. Some of that has to do with the fact that like lash products have different safety requirements that not everyone is wanting to, like, basically what I wanted to highlight is that there are just so many different factors that like not one person can be excellent at all of them. I think there's a pretty big parallel between like cosmetics and food. Kind of like you can't expect every chef to be excellent at making every type of dish.
Yep.
Like they're probably going to have a pretty good understanding of like, I mean, they went to school, they probably know generally what's going on, but they also probably specialize in specific things. Same type of deal here.
Exactly.
If one company, like a makeup company, for example, has a liquid foundation and a powder foundation, it's extremely, extremely likely that those two products are being manufactured at different facilities.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, obviously the chemical interactions between a liquid foundation and a pressed powder, those interactions that need to be considered are completely different. But also the equipment needed to manufacture and fill these types of products is also different. And it's really expensive.
Yeah.
So it's just unlikely that one facility would have all of it, I guess. It is possible, but
yeah, maybe if they
like bigger.
specialize in makeup and they're a much bigger facility, then I could see that. But
yes. Oh, and the other big one that I missed on that list was color. So one of the big distinctions when it comes to most skincare and color cosmetics is the color.
Yes.
So what sets makeup apart from all of them is the fact that the color of the cosmetic is kind of the point.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought much about it until researching this episode. Like, obviously, I know I don't do color cosmetics, and I know why I don't, but also, I don't know. We'll get into it, whatever. If you're using we'll say a night cream, you have a favorite night cream that you use every night, it doesn't really matter if it's like pink or green, because once you put it on your face, it should be clear.
Yeah.
You're expecting it to rub in completely and it doesn't matter. That's obviously not the case with like a foundation. You have to pick a color that matches your skin tone because as soon as you rub it onto your face is going to be that color.
Right.
And this seems super obvious, but the reason that I want to point this out is because if your night cream is a slightly darker shade of green than it was last time you bought it, you probably won't even notice because once it's on your face, you don't see the color anymore. But if you buy a foundation and it's a slightly cooler tone than it was last time, the color of your face is not the way that you remember it being.
Yes.
And that is a big deal to you as a human who's perceiving your own face.
Yeah.
So color cosmetics, that's kind of what sets them apart. That's their specialty, is the precision that is needed in order to produce accurate color cosmetics.
Yep.
Is so much more, I don't know.
It's so much more important.
It is so much more important. Yes. And much more like input equals output when it comes to color cosmetics versus cosmetic actives. For the sake of this conversation, when I say active ingredients, I'm going to be talking about ingredients that are added to a formula to set it apart, usually some sort of like marketing ingredient or like the thing that makes it beneficial. So you need certain ingredients to make the base of a formula to like give it structure and hold the oil and water together and preserve it. So a lot of the ingredients that you see in cosmetics are just they're like the base, the vessel. Right. And then the active ingredient is like sort of confusing term when we're talking about drugs and cosmetics and everything because active ingredient labels are for drug information. But for the sake of this conversation, when I say active ingredients, I'm just talking about the ingredient that is supposedly doing action on your skin. Yeah. So
it would be like vitamin C, hyaluronic acid, niacinamide, like all of the things that you might look for as a consumer.
Yeah. Usually the call out ingredients.
Yeah. They have some sort of benefit beyond just the texture or the feel.
Yeah. And like you probably wouldn't notice if they were there or not. Which is kind of, I mean, yeah.
Unless it's like retinol or something.
Yeah.
Really does a lot.
Yes. But with those like active ingredients, like if you buy a niacinamide serum and somehow not all of the niacinamide made it into the batch, you're probably not going to immediately notice any sort of difference because you don't know exactly the way that is supposed to, like you don't know the exact outcome. Whereas a color cosmetic, the desired outcome is that your face turns that color.
Yep.
With something like a niacinamide serum, you want improved skin texture, but like if your one bottle has a little less niacinamide than the last bottle did, most of the guidelines that we receive as formulation chemists to make these products, it's not like they're testing, it depends on the product, on the active ingredient, but for something like niacinamide, they're not testing the difference between a concentration of 1% and 1.001%. You know, like those probably behave the same way.
Yep.
And maybe I shouldn't say that many zeros because, but even like 1% versus 1.5% for a niacinamide serum, there's so many other factors at play with the formulation and the base and everything that could have an effect. It is just a lot less direct. Like, this outcome equals this thing.
Well, yeah, there's like a time component too, because with skincare, you are not necessarily expecting immediate results.
Yeah. Like, there's nothing that you're going to see happen.
Exactly.
Really.
There's an expectation that it might take a while. Whereas with color cosmetics, it's like, if it's not right the first time, then it's not right. Like, it needs to be correct immediately and correct consistently. Yes. Whereas with skincare, there's just a little bit more leeway, I guess, when it comes to the results.
Yes, exactly. Like if you have a shade of lipstick that you absolutely love, you buy it every single day and you wear it every single day.
If you buy it every single day.
If you buy it every day, that's crazy.
Girl, you have calmed down a little bit. It should last a little bit longer. Yeah.
You don't have to buy it every day unless you're eating it. Don't eat it.
Let's not do that, okay?
Not healthy. That's like a rat study.
Are you a rat?
Yeah, if you're eating one tube of lipstick every day, I would like to run tests.
Yes.
I'd like to I'd like to know more.
That's going to be used as like a lipstick is toxic because if someone eats a whole tube every single day for a year, then it has negative effects. Yeah. Like, oh, guess we shouldn't use them anymore.
Yeah, but if you use the same like lipstick every single day, if it's too warm, it's no longer your perfect shade.
Exactly.
So,
and that can come down to such tiny differences in the color amounts.
Yes. Yeah. There's a huge difference in overall concentration versus like potency or payoff of cosmetic actives versus colors.
Yeah.
So for those active ingredients, they're usually by the ingredient manufacturer, they'll be tested and then the formulator will be given like a use level. And from that use level and any like customer guidance and usually price point is a huge one, they can choose multiple things that combine to form that desired result. And a lot of that is kind of guesswork. So we've talked about this before, but like as cosmetic chemists, when we mix a bunch of active ingredients together, we can't really guarantee the mechanism of action of the product as a whole anymore. Because like once the molecules interact with each other, those active ingredients might be more attracted to each other than they are to your skin and might not interact with your skin at all. Or maybe they could work in combination and the two things together actually work way better than the one alone would, even at a higher concentration. And there's things like that that are like somewhat well known, but a lot of that is still just like a lot of guesswork because there are so many factors at play. But that's not really the case with color cosmetics. There's not a lot of colors that are even available for use. There's a database of active ingredients that you can look at that's like basically any chemical that's available for use in cosmetics in the US market. And it has tons of materials, despite what people would like, because I guess they would like for certain things to not be listed.
For 1,600 of them to be banned.
Yes.
I was just going to ask, is coal tar on that list? Or?
Yeah, I'm sure it is. For color cosmetics, especially in the US, the list of approved colors is very small. And regardless of if it's a cosmetic or a topical OTC, all colors are regulated by the FDA.
Yeah, if you want more info on that, Nat did a great breakdown of that. It's our Red 40 episode, so go check that one out because that one's a very interesting background in how all these colors came to be.
Yeah, colors are weird.
Yeah.
But because of that, like if you want to make a pink product, you're going to have to use red. There's only like 3 options. So pick one of those.
Fewer every day, it seems.
Yeah. Maybe a blue, maybe a yellow, depending on the tone you want to get.
And then sometimes like white, like
white, maybe a black.
Titanium dioxide,
if you want to have. Yeah, the titanium dioxide can add like opacity and lightness. So if you want to have it be like more full coverage but still want it to be dark, sometimes you have to add white and black.
Yeah, the combinations are crazy.
Yeah.
That you don't think about that until you're actually formulating. Because I guess we have dabbled a little bit in color. We have some experience.
Next week, we're going to talk about the color that we have done because where skincare and makeup do converge, it is in areas. We'll explain. I wanted to do this episode, this background episode, to explain why these things don't always mesh, but there are products that do. There are makeup products that have skincare actives in them. And now with this background, hopefully it'll make more sense, the ones that do.
Yeah.
Because it's usually things where it's like, oh yeah, that's because that particular color cosmetic is probably made at a skincare lab and not a color cosmetic lab.
Yep.
Because it's actually a tinted moisturizer. Anyway, we'll get into that next week. But what were you going to say?
I was just saying that like you as a consumer don't realize how complex color formulas are. I don't know if we're planning on talking about this next week, but when there are shade ranges for like foundations and stuff, I think that sometimes the reason why there aren't as many inclusive shade ranges is because it's so difficult to get so many like micro differences in skin shades.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that it's okay. Like
No.
companies should have more inclusive ranges, but I wonder if that's a reason why they don't.
Yeah.
Because of how precise it has to be and how difficult it can be to replicate the results every single time.
Yeah. I also have to wonder if I'm going to talk more. So next week, I'm going to start the episode by talking about why there isn't more makeup in the skincare space. I mean, like we mentioned, the primary function of a color cosmetic is to impart color on your skin. And many cosmetic active ingredients are not like super stable.
Yeah.
And sometimes those two things can kind of be at odds with one another. But a good cosmetic active is usually pretty expensive, and color ingredients are pretty expensive. So I don't know this for fact, but I would guess that another reason why darker shades are not as common is because they're more expensive to produce because they require more color, but you can't sell them for a higher price.
Yep.
That would be insane.
Yeah.
So I think brands kind of cut costs by not including those shades because the formula itself would be more expensive.
Yep. Or just having a couple of options that they offer. But for lighter shades, they offer way more because, they're less expensive.
Yeah. Like the pigment concentration doesn't have to be as high.
Yeah.
And pigments are really expensive. So.
They're so expensive. And honestly, like you do have to add a lot of pigment, especially if the base is like a sunscreen or like if the base is white and it's difficult to tint it in general.
Well, also like for makeup in general, like if the goal is to have the color be, like
that's true.
If that is the goal of the product is to like impart color, then you usually do have to add quite a bit because I mean, color is added to regular skincare cosmetics all the time. I mentioned earlier with a night cream, it's not uncommon for a night. I mean, it's somewhat uncommon now, I'd say, because brands don't necessarily like. I would say if a brand is adding a color to their product that is not a color cosmetic, it's usually to hide oxidation from the aging active ingredients.
Yep. So like if something turns kind of a weird color over time, they'll add a color to hide it.
Like oftentimes retinol will turn yellow, and so sometimes product bases will be tinted yellow to be so that they're just yellow from the get-go. And it's not like it's white and it turns yellow over time because as a consumer, people don't like their white products to turn yellow. That makes them feel like they went bad.
Which they did.
Sorry. Unless you can't see it.
Exactly.
Out of sight, out of mind.
You never know.
Anyway, next week we'll dive more into this intersection of skincare and makeup. And we're going to talk a little bit about some specific products, including one that I'm trying today that I don't know if you've noticed that I keep touching my eyes.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if I'm feeling this one. But I did try a skin beneficial makeup product today. So I'll tell you guys all about that and more next week.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for the intro to makeup and color cosmetics. Yeah, I'm excited for next week. Yeah. And thank you guys for being patient with us while we do a lot of 2-parter episodes. Things are very crazy and sometimes it's easier to just split episodes into 2.
Yeah.
Us.
Especially like in the beginning when we're trying to establish some of this information. I feel like people have a lot of big questions about the industry, but it's hard to even get into some of these questions without giving you more of this background information. So like the intention with today's episode was to just talk about makeup as skincare, but I felt like really in order to be able to explain that accurately, we had to give you a little bit of background on why makeup and skincare are usually just manufactured in different places. So,
yep.
Hopefully now that you know that, next week will make a little bit more sense.
Definitely. Well, until then, you can find us on all of our social media accounts at BeautyXBeaker. We also have personal social media accounts. I'm Sadie BXB.
And I'm not BXB.
You can also go to our website, beautyxbeaker.com, for show notes and the sources that we used? ?
I definitely have more sources for next week's episode than I do for this one. This one was mostly just me telling you my own personal outlook as a professional. I'm just
Yeah.
explaining what I do for work in this episode. So
Well, there
I
you go.
am my source.
The source is Nat. So we'll cite her in the blog post. And then if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can always reach out to us at info@beautyexpeaker.com.
Yes. And did we already say it? Like and subscribe.
Like, subscribe, comment. If you have any suggestions for any skincare infused makeup products that you have tried, let us know because we're curious.
Or maybe just, I mean, we mentioned last week that if you have questions, throw them out there. But if there's also like, I need a full episode on this topic, let us know because we would love to. I mean, we're definitely not running out of ideas.
No.
But we would love to give you guys episodes that interest you as well because sometimes it's hard to know what people actually care about. So
Yeah.
having a little bit of guidance from you would be helpful.
Definitely. Please guide us. Lead us, guide us, walk beside us.
And until next week.
We'll see you then. And until next week, we'll see you then.
We'll see you then.
Yes. Tasty.
I know my back is all sweaty. Ew.